What's up, everybody? Welcome to day 3 of Grinchmas and to my best / most surprising reads from this whole year. These are going to be kind of fun to film, my best and worst, just because overall, unless you've been keeping up on my vlogs, you really don't know what I've been reading. But I will say that so much of what I read this year was either a reread or mid that it was actually really hard to make these lists, so take it, to just accept it. We're doing our best, you know? Let's go in. There's 9 books that I want to talk about today. They're in no particular order, except if they are, I'll let you know. Also, I'll leave everything linked down below in case my descriptions either intrigue you or are not good enough, so just check them out down there if you want to know more. First and foremost, let's start with a very surprising book that I didn't think would be a favorite, and that I reread the moment that I finished it, so obviously I adored it. And that's going to be Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare, which was the sequel to Chain of Gold. Chain of Gold is following the children from the Infernal Devices trilogy. You don't necessarily have to have read the Infernal Devices trilogy, but if you do, it is a lot clearer. I don't want to say much more than like it's following the children from the Infernal Devices trilogy. That's all the description I'm going to give you because it's, you know, most of the way into a series. So what I will say is, though, the reason that I adored it so much was actually the writing. I think that Cassandra Clare has improved a lot since even the Infernal Devices trilogy. I'm not that surprised that this series is one that I adore so much because the Infernal Devices is my favorite trilogy of all the ones that she's written. This one has the power to potentially overthrow that. I just really love the dynamic between the parents and the kids, the parents being the ones that we knew as teenagers in the last series, and it's just fun to be kind of in the same timeline, but also different, see people mature. I also think that I really love the romance in this. It's very much like a forced proximity situation, and I love forced proximity romances. I think that it's being written very well. It's very slow burn. It's steamy when it needs to be. It's just all of that Victorian goodness mixed with romance, you know, like the, oh no, she showed her shoulder. I've been really enjoying it. I'm not surprised. This was one of the first books that I read in the year, and it's definitely still held true to the end as one of my favorite reads. Next, this isn't a surprise to anyone who even mildly probably knows my channel. We have this boy right here, House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in her Crescent City series. It was phenomenal. I have a whole vlog discussing in depth my whole spoilery opinion of it, so if you've read it or if you want to know all my spoilery thoughts, go check that out. I'll link it up above. But it was phenomenal. Let me tell you what Crescent City is about, I guess. The first book, House of Earth and Blood, we follow Bryce, who is mourning a loss that she is also still looking into. Like, she has no closure on a loss that happened to her, and she would like closure, and she is going to become a little bit of a detective to get to that level of closure. I don't want to talk too much about the loss because if you read the summary, you'll be spoiled. Just letting you know. But it was hard because you actually experienced the loss with her the first few, I don't want to say too much about it, but it is a fantasy world, but it's like a modern fantasy world. It has cell phones, but ones like that are powered by magic, like the ley lines are powered by magic. It's hard to describe actually now that I'm thinking about it, but it is an adult fantasy series, so also expect a lot of steaminess in it. Also, another little fact is the humans in this world, being non-magical, are actually very much hated by all of the other magical beings, so that's that. This one follows the events of House of Earth and Blood. I thought that nothing could shock me more than House of Earth and Blood did, because that one, it felt like a whole completed book all on its own. This one, wow, that ending though, I saw it coming, but I didn't see it coming like that, you know, and it was still exciting, it was still a really good time. I have tons of fun with Sarah J. Maas's books, mostly because I like to theorize the entire time, so I'll read through them, have my theories, try and figure out what I know, and by the end of this one I actually did think that I knew quite a bit, so it was fun. I loved it. I love Sarah J. Maas's work though, so it's not that surprising. This is such a cute little read. We have Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This is like a bind up of a little comic series of a vampire, like a few 100-year-old vampire that falls in love with a werewolf, and it's just them like going about on their daily journeys and how much they like love and respect each other's differences. I think it's very cute. It's very heartwarming, but it also has just like very funny moments. It is like a disjointed storytelling situation. It's not like it's like a one story all the way through. It's just like separate days, separate events as you go through it. I enjoyed it. I'm not that surprised that I enjoyed it. I feel like everyone that has read this has had a good time with it, but I'm glad I did too, you know? Ooh, this beast. This is the one that's most fresh in my mind right now, so excuse me if I gush, but Dark Age by Pierce Brown, 5-star read. This was fantastic. I adore Pierce Brown's work. I just really like the way that he writes. I think that there's just so much intelligence in this, is what it feels like. It just feels smart. It feels like the people that we're reading from are smart, and it makes me feel smarter by proxy. The vocabulary in this is delectable. The world is vicious, actually, but also just so interesting and so like out of this world. It's a sci-fi series, so it takes place hundreds of years in our future, and basically at this point in time, humans have been able to go to different planets. Dark Age is actually the second book in the trilogy that follows the Red Rising trilogy, so I don't want to give you too many details about this. Although technically you can read this series without having read the first, you will be lost and doing yourself a disservice if you do that, so I'm going to explain Red Rising. Red Rising follows Darrow. He is a Red, and he works in the mines of Mars to extract a substance that they are going to need to terraform Mars eventually. And all of his family and his generations of family have always worked in the mines. That's what they do. They have a good time with it. It's a vicious lifestyle, but they do it because they have to do it to eventually terraform. And all of his beliefs about the world and his simple life kind of come crumbling to the ground when his beloved dies, but he gets taken up to the top, and he realizes that all of those lies that he's believed his entire life are in fact lies, because the terraforming happened. It happened hundreds of years ago. There is no good reason for them to have had to stay down there in those vicious climates. It's a very hard job. A lot of people die very young down in the mines. And he's realized that for the most part, they've been enslaved by their lack of knowledge by the golds, because in this new world, everyone is split between their color. It's not just a class system though. There are significant differences between each of the colors. Like, for example, blues can tune into an interface, like technologically, like they literally tune in technologically. And then we have reds, who are considered the lowest of the low colors. They are just kind of there to be grunts and do grunt work. And there are some that live on the top of the world, but most of them live down in the mines. And then we have the rulers of this society, which are the golds. And the golds are physical beasts. They are taller, stronger, smarter, better. They are born genetically with an advantage over everyone else, and they are also their leaders. And Darrow sees this unfairness and agrees to a plan to attempt to infiltrate the golds and overthrow the society that has been at work for hundreds of years. It's a vicious story, guys. This one was hard. It was slow. I will say there was definitely parts that dragged in it, but it always just reels me back in. The stakes in this are so high. You don't know if one of your favorite characters is going to die from one page to the next. You don't know if anyone has any chance of living. Even when they do live, they're just like tortured for a good amount of time. So it's hard to read. It's a lot of anxiety, and it's gory. Like, there is a lot of descriptions of war in this, and it's brutal. I don't know. I love it. It's also like a philosophical discussion most of the time. Like, the golds just speak so eloquently and philosophically and strategically. I don't know. Maybe someone smarter than me would read this and be like, that's so dumb. But I read it and I think, wow, this is the smartest thing ever. The next book on this list is actually a reread. I will say those first like few were actually 100% like the best books ever. And then after this book, it'll kind of go down into like, I still really enjoyed this. Now, is it a favorite of all time? I don't know. But Crooked Kingdom. Again, this was a reread, but it was my first reread since I originally read it like 6 years ago or something. This is the sequel to Six of Crows, and I loved it. I'm really glad I redid my reread. I'm really glad I reread it. It has such an intricate plot that I had forgotten about. The basis of Six of Crows is obviously that this like gang they get recruited to an impossible mission. They have to steal something from an impenetrable fortress. They are just like a bunch of thieves and crooks and gangsters from the streets of Ketterdam, and the only difference is that they are kind of the best at what they do, and so they are going to try this impossible mission to get an impossible payout. It's fascinating. I mean, both of them follow very different heists. I love seeing how Kaz Brecker's mind works. He's a con man, but he is just like a genius at being a con man. And I love seeing like the trauma that all of these characters bring into it, because they are, again, on the streets of Ketterdam. They are gangsters. They have been put in a situation in their lives that they otherwise would not have ever chosen for themselves. And all of them bring their own different traumas to the crew. And all of them, I think, are done very respectfully from what I could tell. I also loved seeing like the bits and pieces of Grisha history from Shadow and Bone, and just seeing how much Lee Bardugo's writing improved from Shadow and Bone, because it is like night and day. I love this crew. I'm very happy I did a reread. All right, Heroes by Stephen Fry. Honestly, this was more of just like, I'm surprised that I liked it as much as I did. It is stories of heroes, like Greek heroes, and it's told more in a modern tongue. Stephen Fry has a very like storyteller way of speaking, but you can also tell that like all of the knowledge just feels very well researched, or something that he just understands very, very well. And I got to learn a lot more about like Greek heroes that I thought I knew a lot about, and that I then realized I didn't know that much about, because even like Heracles, his trials, even though I remember reading about them, this cleared up a lot of things that I thought that I'd never learned. There was a lot of other heroes that were also spoken of that I had never had the patience or like knowledge to learn about, so it was fun to have it all kind of like encapsulated in one bound up story. I listened to this on audio, and Stephen Fry actually narrates it himself, and I love his way of narration. It's very fun. Like I said, it's a very modern way of telling the story, so like it makes it funny, because you just like get to see these characters that have been like blown up into your mind as like legendary heroes, and see them just be regular people, kind of. I'm glad I read it. All right, this one, I actually kind of went back and forth, because I read both of his books this year, and I gave the other one 5 stars and this one 4 stars. But at the end of the day, this one sticks with me more, because I was expecting the worst. I expected this to suck. I expected to hate this book. So when I read it and actually really enjoyed it and loved the dark academia vibes that I felt throughout it, it stuck, you know? Even if the mystery maybe wasn't what I wanted it to be. And that's The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. Mariana was a student at Cambridge, and basically her niece is now a student in Cambridge, and she's responsible for her niece. Both of her niece's parents are dead, so she's responsible for Zoe. And Zoe is kind of going through it because her best friend just got murdered on campus. So Mariana's like, do you want me to come see you? And she goes to Cambridge, even though it's going to lift a lot of memories that she has about the place, because she herself is also going through a moment of grief because of a situation that happened that gets cleared up during the story. But a lot of her grief is also entwined with Cambridge, because that's where her happiest moments were. So she does the difficult thing and still goes to Cambridge because she's responsible for Zoe. She wants to be there for her. And she also wants to figure out who the heck killed Zoe's best friend, because she doesn't think that the police are doing a good job of finding out who it is. And she is going to go there to solve the mystery and murder, and, you know, kind of go through her own grief and be there for her niece. It's a mix of all of those things. And we get told bits and pieces of each of the stories as the story goes on. I will say that the twist at the end was maybe not as twisty as it could have been. I kind of saw it coming, but it was still really fun to read. I liked the setting. I think that like one of the things that he did very well in this was describing the landscape of Cambridge and how beautiful it is, and the libraries. And we also had a lot of like moments where famous poets and famous just writers were quoted throughout this, because that was Mariana's specialty at one point, and it was just fun to see, fun to read. I liked that vibe throughout it. So yeah. This book, this was a lovely surprise, because Adam actually bought it for me for Christmas last year, and I had never heard of this poetry collection, but he'd actually been keeping an eye on it because he followed the page on Instagram, and he always wanted to get it for me since he knows that I like poetry. So reading it from the perspective of him buying it and finding it for me just added to the story. It might not be the most perfect piece, but like it made it lovely. And that is Love Her Wild by Atticus. Like I said, not every poem in this is perfect. perfect. A lot of it is just like, oh yeah, that's kind of a basic thought. But like, it was just nice to know that a lot of these poems are things that when he read them on Instagram, he thought of me. And I was like, oh, it really improved like my read of this. I also read it in a time where I was like really sad because I picked it up after my cat died earlier this year and I was still very, very sad. So when I read this, it was like a boost in more ways than just one. Yeah, it's gonna hold a special place in my heart. I really liked it. Now this last book. I want to preface this by saying this is actually more of just like, I'm very surprised at how addicted to this series I became this year because it's not well written at all, especially not the first book. I had so many critiques throughout it, and then I finally just kind of like fell into the addiction that was the tropes that I love to see in things that shouldn't maybe be put all together, but because they were put all together, it made it absolutely addictive. Zodiac Academy. I feel like it wouldn't even be honest if I didn't include one of the books in this list, just because they were such a surprise. They held such a strong place in my mind for so much of the year. Even if maybe I haven't finished the 7th book because I got a little bit bored, but this still holds a place. Zodiac Academy, this is The Awakening. It's by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti. What I will say is if this was edited, it would probably be really, really well. I don't know. If this was edited, it would be better. But it's still fun. It's still crazy to see just like the situations that these girls get themselves in. Basically, we're following twins who were in the foster care system their entire lives after their parents died in a fire, and they've kind of never had it good. They've always been poor and like gotten really mean foster parents. They've been switched between foster parents all the time, and they've just been waiting for the day that they turn 18 so that they can leave their newest foster and like get away from all of that. And you see them in this like living in squalor basically when this very handsome, very tall, very mysterious man comes to retrieve them and say that they are actually part of the Fae. And the Fae live in a different dimension that lives side by side with the world, and they all have like elemental magic, and that they specifically are the lost heirs to the throne. And they're like, what? And then they get like transported there because they have one rule. You can get your fortune, you can get your inheritance, which is all they ever wanted, but only if you come to study at Zodiac Academy and finish the 4 years there. After that, you can have your fortune. You don't need the throne or anything. You can leave. So they're like, okay, we'll do it. They get dropped into this academy where everyone hates them because there's already heirs to the throne. The council had taken over the throne once the king had died, and they are set to inherit it. And then now there's these two twins that don't know anything about their world, anything about their rules, anything about magic, or anything in general, and they're expected to maybe potentially take the throne, and the girls are like, no, we don't want your throne, we just want the money, and they're like, we don't believe you. And yeah, and of course all of the heirs to the council are like hot guys. That's it. That's the basis of this story. I will say that this gets a lot more convoluted as the story goes on. I was stressed for most of my time reading it, and there's such a loss of hope as the series keeps going. Like every time you get like an inch of hope, it gets stolen away. It's like one step forward and like 30 steps back. It hurts. It hurts. But yeah, that's it. I think those are the 9 books that I wanted to talk about today. I would love to know what your most surprising or best read of this year was. Obviously, I need to read a lot more betterer. I guess in general, yeah. I would love to read books that you guys think were fantastic just because I trust your opinion. Or I at least trust it enough to like look it up on Goodreads and potentially add it to my want to read list, you know? So that's that. Thanks for watching this video today, guys, and I will see you tomorrow for my most disappointing reads, which that one was an easier list to come up with, I won't lie to you. Still 9 books though. Still 9 books. Goodbye.
What beautiful creature.